It's wild how sometimes the story behind a song could be even more interesting than the song itself.
Right.
Like finding out what was going on in the artist's life when they wrote it, or, just the random stuff that happened in the studio.
Yeah, the backstory can completely change how you hear a track.
Exactly. And today we're going to dive deep into some pretty revealing stuff that Timbaland recently shared about his work with Jay-Z and Beyoncé.
Yeah, we're talking about some big albums and songs here. We're going to be looking specifically at Jay-Z's Magna Carta Holy Grail and Beyoncé's, mega hit Drunk in Love.
Oh, yeah.
And we can't forget about Justin Timberlake's The 2020 Experience.
Right. Like all massive albums.
Hugely successful. But what's really interesting is that Timbaland has been talking about the tough time he was going through personally while he was making this music.
Yeah, and, it gets you thinking, like, how does an artist's personal life, good or bad, affect their work and how we hear it?
Right. It's a really fascinating connection. So Timbaland was on the Pivot podcast recently, and he was very open about his studies with addiction.
Yeah.
And he straight up admitted that he was using drugs while he was producing those albums for Jay-Z and Beyoncé.
Wow.
But get this, he still considers the music he made during that time to be great music.
Okay, now that's interesting. Great music. What does that even mean?
Right. Like, what's his definition of great? Well, here's the thing. He also said that he believes his very best work was done when he wasn't using drugs.
So he's saying there's great and then there's his best.
Yeah, like two different levels.
So when he says best work, what's he talking about? Like which track?
He's talking about those classic game-changing songs he produced earlier in his career before his struggles with addiction. Songs like Jay-Z's Big Pimpin' and Dirt Off Your Shoulder come to mind.
Oh man, those are huge.
Absolutely. And let's not forget Aaliyah's One in a Million. Huge tracks.
Yeah, I mean, those are iconic for sure.
Yeah. He's basically implying that Magna Carta, Holy Grail, and Drunk in Love, while they were great, they didn't quite reach the same level as his earlier hits.
Wow, so he's kind of ranking his own music, like with a scoring system or something.
Yeah, almost like he's got this internal measuring stick that we don't even know about.
It's like he's saying that time period, even with all the success, was kind of a dip for him creatively.
Exactly. He actually used the word dip when talking about his career.
Wow.
But here's the thing. He wasn't saying that the music from that time was bad. He actually credits his God-given talent for keeping the quality up there.
Okay, so it's like his talent was carrying him through a tough time.
Yeah, like his natural ability was shining through despite the challenges.
But he's still separating his talent from his personal struggles. Why do you think he does that?
That's a good question. I think it's possible he feels like he wasn't able to fully express his creative vision during that period. Like maybe his addiction was holding him back in some way.
Maybe he wasn't as sharp or as focused.
Right? Maybe he couldn't quite get the sounds he was hearing in his head out onto the track. And that's why he makes a distinction between that era and something like Justin Timberlake's Future Sex Love Sounds.
Oh yeah, that album was revolutionary.
Absolutely. So innovative, a real turning point in music. And he's comparing that to his later work, which suggests he feels like something was missing during those years.
So maybe he's saying like he wasn't able to be as groundbreaking or as innovative during his addiction.
It seems that way.
Makes you think. Timbaland has talked about Jay-Z and Beyoncé before too, right? I feel like I've heard him say really great things about them.
Totally. He was on Club Shay last year, and he talked about how much he respects Jay's. Called him a prophet, even.
A prophet? Wow.
Yeah. And he also said that Jay's practically raised him in the music industry.
So Jay's was like a mentor to him.
Very much so. And that just shows how strong their connection is. It's not just about the music. It's a deep personal bond.
And he used a really powerful analogy to describe their musical relationship too. Didn't he say something about like rewriting the Bible?
Yeah, exactly. He compared making music with Jay-Z to rewriting the Bible. Like that's how monumental he sees their collaborations.
That's a pretty huge statement.
It is. Like they were creating something totally new and important, changing the game.
And it's not just Timbaland who thinks that about them.
Right.
Drake has talked about Jay-Z and Beyoncé in a similar way, recognizing their impact.
Totally. He's toast about how talented they are, how much they've influenced him. So it's not just fans who recognize their greatness. Other artists see it too.
It's like they're on a whole other level. And, it sounds like those relationships were really important for Timbaland, especially when he was going through that dark period.
Yeah, he's been open about that. He said that both Jay-Z and Drake were there for him when he needed it most.
It's like they helped pull him through.
Yeah, they were a source of support when he was struggling, helped him get back on track.
So to sum it up, we've got this super talented producer, Timbaland. He makes all this amazing music with Jay-Z and Beyoncé while dealing with addiction. And the music's a huge hit, but he feels like it wasn't his best because of what he was going through personally.
It really is a fascinating contradiction. On one hand, you have these massive hits, but on the other hand, you have the artist's own perspective on his work and how he feels it could have been even better.
And that brings us to a question for our listeners. Think about those songs like Drunk in Love. Think about the Magna Carta Holy Grail album. Now that you know about the circumstances surrounding their creation, does it change how you hear them?
It's definitely something to consider. I mean, we often appreciate art at face value, but understanding what the artist was going through adds a whole new dimension to the experience.
It does, and sometimes knowing the backstory can make you appreciate the art even more.
Absolutely. Like knowing the struggles they overcame to create it, it's inspiring.
It is. So what we encourage you to do is go back and listen to Timbaland's music with this new perspective. Listen to those early hits he talked about, then listen to the later stuff and see if you hear a difference.
It's a fun experiment. And you can even do it with other artists too. Think about the musicians you love. What were they going through when they made their music? It's a whole new way to connect with the art we enjoy.
It really is. And that's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right? You never know what you're going to uncover.
Absolutely. And sometimes those hidden stories are the most fascinating part.
Totally agree.